What's happened to honest, objective reporting?
Well, I'm not sure there ever was honest and objective reporting, but there is an interesting thing going on. You would think with the internet and cable and all these new outlets, more information should mean more truth. The more information, the freer, the more open it is, should mean more truth. But I worry that the opposite is happening. That it's now more possible for untruth to adhere, to take hold. And the example that people were talking about this week was this thing that got out first from the Indian press, then to Drudge, then to the right-wing radio guys, and to Congress, that Obama was spending $200 million a day on his foreign trip, which is complete nonsense. It was finally knocked down. But you start to wonder, you hear, if people get their information by the internet, by emails from their Uncle Joe, you know, if that's where they're getting their information, is it possible that real untruth will take hold in a way that we didn't think was possible in our open system?
I think that this is worrisome, and it's left and right. It's the people who think that the Bush administration somehow was responsible for 9/11, or that a trip that clearly costs in total something like $5 or $6 million at the most, and is really $200 million. It's you know, they're not the same. I mean, a day. They're not the same in importance, obviously, but this really, the fact that there doesn't seem to be any factual agreement about anything, allows us to sort of entertain the most odd and conspiratorial fantasies.
Well, when Walter Cronkite was doing the news, we had ABC, we had NBC, we had CBS, we had the New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago papers, and so forth. We didn't have all these myriad sources of information, which there was sort of a standard belief about things, Charles.
Right, and the gatekeepers were largely bi-coastal liberals, and people would take their news from the front page of the New York Times. Now you have competition. People are all upset. I must say, speaking about weird conspiracy theories which develop into untruth, people are all worried about a detail about Obama's trip. The central untruth of this decade was that George Bush, a president, lied us into war, an act of treason. He deliberately distorted the facts, knowing that there were no weapons of mass, lied us into war. It wasn't that he made a mistake. Lied us into war, which is not only widely held, it's repeated by columnists in New York Times, by Democratic leaders. It's not just internet weird stuff. And I don't remember my liberal colleagues being upset about the death of truth at that point.
Well, we never did find weapons of mass destruction.
No,
that doesn't mean he lied us into war. There's a great
the truth was there were no weapons of mass destruction.
It was a question of reckless and negligent taking the nation to war on a totally flawed and false premise.
Are you denying that Democratic leaders have accused Bush of lying us into war?
I have never heard a Democratic leader, and we have to define who Democratic leaders. I never heard a Democratic candidate for president say this, or anybody who was a question for that. But I think we're in a different time and a different era. We can talk about the new outlets and everything else. Nobody ever questioned that John Kennedy was a Catholic, or Ronald Reagan was a Presbyterian, or Harry Truman was a Baptist, or Richard Nixon was a Quaker. But when you get a large segment questioning whether Barack Obama is a Christian, whether in fact he's an American, and that number is growing, then I'll tell you that's the byproduct of what you're describing, of irresponsible, unedited and unaccountable information being circulated both in broadcast and internet and print.